for actor Oscar.
Thank you very much. That's so sweet.
Is it sunk in yet?
Not yet. It's cool though.
Yeah.
I like being introduced like that.
Let's go back to the beginning, which I believe was just 9 weeks before cameras started rolling on this. Where were you? What were you up to? And how did this come together so quickly?
I was in Australia shooting this limited series for Justin Kurzel called Aero to the Deep North, which if you haven't seen America, please watch it. I would love that. And I was in this particularly intense part of filming because half of the show takes place in a prisoner of war camp. And my agent, Matt, called me and he said, we have Guillermo del Toro script. And I thought it might have been like one for, because I knew he was doing Frankenstein. It was all across the trades. And I said, is it Frankenstein? He said, yeah. And I was like, for what? And he's like, read it. And then I had to read it, and it was to play the creature. And then the next morning I had to just jumped on FaceTime to record me. And it was Guillermo. He said, my friend, what did you think? I was like, well, you didn't say that.
And the fact that there was so little time really compared to what probably would have been ideal for, or normal, at least would have been normal, did that give you any pause, or was it, Guillermo, we're gonna make it work?
Well, the thing with this particular show we were doing, we'd all had to, we'd gone through this process of losing a lot of weight, and it was kind of this imperative part of it was that we would build our weight back, and no one was supposed to work, and we were supposed to go through this training process. But the 9 weeks, 4 of the weeks got taken up with filming Justin's show, and 5 of the weeks got taken up with the show, and then there was 4 weeks until we shot. So I didn't have any time to recover or get back, so I kind of just jumped straight into it. Which by the nature of the role, there's so much to obsess over. And I think it was great that I didn't have a lot of time to obsess. I kind of just had to sort of just fall off the edge and just see what happens on the way down. You know what I mean?
And I know from things you previously said that, obviously there was going to be significant time and makeup and prosthetics, but how did you and Guillermo sort of set the table for that? You discussed it before, and I think it seems to have affected the way you thought about it and approached it.
Sorry.
Well, just in terms of...
Sorry, I just got off the plane from London. I'm absolutely torched. I'm saying 2 minutes at one time. Pardon me.
I don't know. Just that, on the one hand, you could look at it as, oh my God, I have to spend sometimes as much as 10 hours in a...
No, well, the prosthetic process was one of the first things that Guillermo mentioned. And he said, you can't be afraid of them. You have to take the sacrament every morning. It has to be a spiritual process, otherwise it won't work. He said, the prosthetics need to be part of your fusion with the role. And when someone, sets that challenge for you, I promised him, I was like, you'll never hear from me. Like, you'll never hear a peep out of me. And that was a goal that I sort of set myself for the 10-hour processes. And then it worked, after 3 hours, you're just completely in this meditative state, and you just submit to it,
And then when you come out of the makeup chair, generally it seems like the rest of the crew has been working for portions of the day already, so you show up on set. What's that like when you walk out there and everybody sort of sees you for the first time?
They're like, hurry the fuck up. Everyone wants to try to hurry. We've been shooting for 8 hours and I'm coming in to just do this funny little But no, I mean, the first couple of times, I was so nervous coming in. It felt like those dreams where you're at school and then you realise your pants aren't on. It was like that. Because I don't know, there was something about being in the sort of leather underwear and having the paint on and not knowing if people were going to buy it or if it was going to work. So there was a lot of fear, I suppose. But there was a general sort of hush when the creature came onto set. There was a lot of respect from the crew and everything, which made it easier to work and to feel foreign because no one wanted to come up to you because they thought, like, I might die or something.
So, Frankenstein obviously has a literary material, which is what this is really adapting, not the previous movies, goes back more than a century. The movies, though, it's almost a century since the first Frankenstein,
It's crazy.
right? And then of course the many sequels, Bride of, Son of, whatever, so many young, exactly, young. I guess I wonder, were you tempted, were you discouraged from taking a peek back at the prior versions in terms of while you were thinking about how you were gonna do this?
Yeah, I was. I had that, there's like an active thing in your head that's like, you don't want to be influenced by anything and like, you want to be original and like all that kind of thing. And I said to Guillaume, I was like, so should I rewatch the films or what do you think? And he was like, it's just a fucking movie. He was like, no. He's like, you steal from it, that's your fault. And then from that, I just went and downloaded all of them. And across every sort of Frankenstein picture made, and I've seen every Scooby-Doo episode. Transylvania, and but there's a language between all of the creatures, with De Niro's and Carlos, and it's either in the hands or in the way that they move. So I was kind of like a bowerbird or a magpie. I took little bits and pieces from each one's body, even the cartoons, and just sort of tried to download them and interpret them and then put them into my own sort of version.
One thing that I guess, some of those early creatures might have had experience on sets in old Hollywood, but probably, it's a very rare thing today, are the ability to walk out of your makeup trailer and walk onto a set where everything around you is real, because I know Guillermo's adamant about practical sets, 360 degree, you can shoot it all around, but that, for I guess financial reasons, just like doesn't happen anymore. And so I wonder for you how helpful that is to be in a real world, essentially, stepping into a real world.
Yeah, I wonder if it is financial. I don't know, because there's like $200 million movies being made that are just purely CGI. So I'm not sure how much money has to do with it. I'm sure it's expensive, but I think a lot of people are just lazy and bullshitting and don't want to do it or lack of creativity. But no, it's everything, and not only is it's imperative for the performance, because the lighting, the costume, the makeup design, the tower in front of me with the dripping water, the real burning flames, that all makes my movement believable. It makes my voice believable. It's impossible, but the world makes me believable, the fairy tale that's built. And also, it's just a lot of fucking fun to build things with your hands, like to see these craftspeople on the wings of the studio painting these daisies, with their hands and putting dust onto daggers and swords and picking the right chalice, and it's more exciting, and it's the dream that you have as an actor. You want to play, as a filmmaker, you want to build. You don't want to just put a code into a computer and then see a sunset that's not real.
With obviously, the character's physical evolution is so central. We're seeing him evolve and adapt and all of that. But what I wonder then for you, I'm assuming that like the vast majority of movies, this was not shot in sequence.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the first scene where I spoke was one of the first scenes that we shot, and it was the first scene that Oscar and I shot together, which was, you would have just seen the forgiveness scene at the end of the film. It was the first time I talked on camera. And it was kind of, luckily there was portions, like there was, we did that randomly, and then I was in the blind man's house for a couple of weeks. And that was really great for me developmentally, because I was still putting the characters together. And luckily I learned almost everything from David Bradley in that section of the film. So I was learning from him as a creature as I was learning from him as an actor. He was sort of telling me how to speak and move and yeah.
But I mean, there are things, as you say, like I think sometimes because of just practicalities on set or who's available or the weather or whatever, you just do what you have to do. And I think the first time you did have to speak was maybe sooner than you would have wanted.
Way sooner, yeah, because I didn't know what the voice was going to sound like, and I tried sort of whispering near Guillermo a couple of times to see if he like, yeah, that's it. And I get a random text at like 2 a.m. from him that says, think of gravel, more gravel. Let's just go eat rocks or something. But then, just by nature of making the film, as soon as I put the teeth in, and he said action, I had a sort of general idea of how I wanted it to sound. I've been doing these sort of throat chants and putting the voice in different places, and then it just happened when he said action, the voice sort of jumped out, and I think we all kind of knew in that moment that was where it was going to develop from and go from. And also I was lucky because we didn't shoot in order. His voice changes sort of 3 times throughout the film, so I could jump back and forth, and there's a bit when he comes down and he says, my name is Ozymandias. Like he's still learning how to breathe and project, and then by the end he has a close to Victor's voice. It's more RP and English and fully formed, and it flows. So that doesn't answer your question, but shooting out of order was also helpful because the whole thing was sort of pieced together and flowy, I suppose.
Had you ever dealt with Oscar Isaac or Mia Goth before this, or were you guys kind of getting to know each other as
just as a fan? I mean, I've watched Oscar and when I saw Inside Llewyn Davis in Ex Machina, I was like, wow, like this guy's a genius, and Mia is obviously just like one of the greatest truth tellers we have as an actor. She's like Gina Rollins on crack, she's so authentic and real. So just as a fan, and then my interactions with them were always just as a creature because we didn't really have a rehearsal period or anything like that.
when you look back at it now, or if you imagine years from now when you look back at this film, was there a scene or a sequence that you're gonna remember challenging you the most? Was there a kind of a day that was the biggest piece?
No, there was, because everything was so specific and singular, it was all so enjoyable. I got so addicted to having the makeup on and playing him that everything was kind of exciting. I do remember there was one time where I had to carry Mia down like 30 steps or something like that. And it wasn't that she was heavy at all. It was the steps, it's in the bit at the end where he's walking her down. It's this really beautiful shot. And they had this dummy for me to carry. And I was like, this is the monster shot. Like, this is the monster movie shot. Like, you have to carry the bride down the stairs, otherwise, that's everything. And the stairs were straight, but when you got to the bottom, there was this one step that was shaped like that. So I was using the back of my heels on like each step, like kind of like going like this, so because I couldn't look down. And the last one was rounded, so I went to like do that with my foot, and there was nothing there. Like he just fell. But I couldn't drop Mia because then it would have been like everyone would have felt terrible. So I held her up, and my ankle came down. And at that point, Oscar has quoted me saying, I was like, remember, I'm a human being. That was probably one of the tough ones.
Well, you have talked about the fact that I think not just the making of the project, but also a moment you guys go and premiered this film at world premiere in Venice. I think there was a 15-minute standing ovation for the film, and particularly valuable when they close up on you. And you've since been asked about that.
Yes, I cried.
Well, I'm not even going there. I'm just curious, because what you seem to have said is that the whole experience, including maybe that moment representing something, has sort of changed the way you feel about being in this business, what your role is, and maybe, or just how you kind of carry yourself in the business or something, where you feel you belong in the business. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, because it makes sense. Like, this is obviously a big achievement and a moment in a career, but I mean, it's not like you were doing badly before this. So what was it about that?
I think it's strange, because this is, like, even sitting here now, without the iPhones, this was exactly dreamt of in my head when I was 14, 15 years old thinking about movies, having a tuxedo, not all the flashy stuff, but at that particular moment, my mum and dad were behind me and my sister was behind me. I was with my agent who's been with me for nearly a decade now. And it was how I pictured being in the movies in my head. And I'd been acting and I'd had jobs, but I still felt like I was fighting for my life on every single job. But this was sort of the first moment where I was like, I don't know, I felt like I'd achieved something that I'd been picturing so intensely for the longest time. So it was like a combination of racing toward a dream, I guess. But I take it back now, I'm terrified as ever.
Well, the last thing we gotta talk about is another one of those probably pinch moments, which was, I don't know, 2 or so weeks ago, maybe a little over. What were you doing at 5:30 a.m. on the day of the nomination?
I was desperately trying to find peace leading up to that. Somebody called me, my agent called me a couple of days before, and was like, okay, so when it happens, I was like, shut up. Just shut your mouth. And he was like, what? I was like, shut up. And I hung up, and then my mom tried to mention it, I was like, shut up. So I was just playing PlayStation, trying to forget. And I did forget. And I was asleep. And then my mom's phone rang downstairs because she was staying with me. And I woke up and I went, oh, I know what that phone call is. And then she came running up the stairs. And she opened my door at 5 a.m. And I remember I had heard it coming. And my hood had fallen off while I was asleep, but I wanted to be really nonchalant. So I put my hood back on and was like, and I was like, what? And she's like, it happened. And we were like, all day we were just sort of in the house, just like bumping into things. Like, just sort of walking around, and you kind of just start. It was terribly exciting and ridiculous and absurd and entirely enjoyable all at the same time.
Awesome. Well deserved, and thank you so much for coming.